everybody. Welcome back to Eggs. We are thrilled with today's guest. We've got Mickie Kennedy. Mickie, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Absolutely great. It's a wonderful day in the neighborhood. We're taping this on Valentine's Day, which is also my youngest son's birthday. So today is a little chaotic, but I'm thrilled to have something or some semblance of normalcy, which is sitting down and doing the show with a guest. So thanks so much for joining us, Mickie.
Sure. Yeah. Why don't you give us a brief history of who you are and what you do?
So my name is Mickie Kennedy. I'm the founder of eReleases press release distribution. We've been in business for just over 25 years. I started in PR out of grad school, and I was figuring out press releases and sending them out by fax for a telecom research startup. And I started to get really good at it and just said to myself, I don't know why other businesses aren't doing this. We were getting picked up by like Financial Times, The Economist, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post. And I also saw journalists say, hey, you don't have to fax us anymore. You can just email us. And so the light bulb went off and I was like, email. So I started reaching out to journalists in other beats outside of telecom and asked if I could add them to a database where I would email them press releases from clients. And they said, sure. 26 years ago, they're like, email, that's great. Keep it coming. So I launched about a year later with 10,000 journalists in my database. And I just, was a matchmaker. I would have a client and I would send a release that we wrote to who I thought was interested in it. And over the years, PR Newswire, which is the oldest and largest newswire of press releases, reached out to us and said, hey, is there any way we could work together? And I said, I don't know. I doubt it, because you guys charge $1,600 to move a 600-word press release nationally. And I think I was charging $200 or $300 at the time. And so, despite that, they really liked that we were supporting small businesses and entrepreneurs and startups. And, I visited the editorial office and learned a little bit about them. They have an editorial team overnight that they don't really use. They have to be there if there's breaking news or, something has to go to Asia, but they don't work. And so I was like, hey, what if we set up my releases to be next day distribution by default? And you could set them up overnight, no additional labor, because you've got people there, sitting idle. And so, that was sort of how we cobbled together a win-win between the two of us that worked. And, since then, all of our releases have been going out nationally over PR Newswire. And, our cost is probably like, 50 to 70% cheaper than going directly to the wire.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, let's talk quickly maybe about just sort of the fundamentals of a press release, for example, not so much how they're put together, but what they are and why we use them. I think, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm reading this totally wrong, but I think I'm old enough that press releases were really common when I was younger, and I've used them numerous times with clients. But at some point, maybe because of email and all that stuff, they kind of, I don't know, people started putting out things they were calling a press release, but they weren't really doing anything with it, right? They're putting it up as a blog, or they were, sending it out as a newsletter or something maybe to their people. But I wonder if, a little bit of, technology and just sort of this being maybe an older or a more traditional way of spreading the word about a product, I wonder if it's lost a little luster and, maybe shouldn't have, unfairly. So I wonder if you talk a little bit about just sort of the place of a press release in the system, how people are using them in modern times, and,
Sure.
Where they live in sort of our overall marketing mix.
Right. So a press release is not a very sexy product. It's written in a third person, usually a captivating headline, an opening paragraph where you're hoping to hook them in with what you feel is newsworthy at the moment. And, it's usually between 400 and 600 words. How it's utilized is, journalists are busy, with layoffs and everything else that's going on in media. Traditional journalists are expected to do a lot more with a lot less. So, rather than going through their inbox. A lot of them are going to the wire where they can create customized feeds. So it's not just an industry feed, but they can actually have certain keywords to exclude press releases on that or include if it definitely has certain keywords. And so it's very specific to them. And so it's a very valuable tool for them. And we're also, there is sort of a duopoly in the United States with newswires, press releases. There's PR Newswire and Business Wire. There's a smaller player called Globe Newswire, but it pretty much is these two guys. There's traditional wires that work differently that people are probably aware of, like AP, UPI, United Press International, Reuters. They work differently. They don't move press releases. Everything they move has been written by them, and they license that to newspapers and other publications, so they don't have to write every breaking story. They can just license a few articles and include it. And then also we have a marketplace that even though there's just basically a duopoly of newswires, there's probably 60 companies with wire in their name that purport to be wires that aren't. They're not reaching journalists directly. A lot of them are doing what is called syndication. And when you move a press release over a wire, our goal is earned media. And that's what we call it when a journalist writes an article about you. And that's the end goal, to have that article. For syndication, they're like, we don't care about people rewriting this. We want that press release just duplicated on a bunch of websites. And they make deals with news sites. Usually they're not big news sites. Sometimes they can be, but usually they're just a section of the website that has no traffic and doesn't really get any SEO. And the press releases actually say no follow links. And so there's really not any SEO benefit of it. And syndication came into play because it was an SEO thing. And now there's really very little benefit to it, but it does muddy the marketplace and confuse a lot of people who are looking to, send a release, and they're like, oh, I could spend $29 or $69 to go to this newswire. But you're not. I mean, your cheapest legitimate newswire is going to be over $700, $800. Unless you use a service like eReleases that has a discount because they're moving such volume. We do over 10,000 releases a year on behalf of small businesses, and we only work with small businesses.
So let's actually talk about that, because when I think press release, I think of Tesla launching a new vehicle, like tech stuff, bigger stuff. I don't think of mom and pop down the street. I created a new pizza on my menu. Let's do a press release. How can it help a small business, a mom and pop shop, to do a press release other than to maybe do something in the local paper? Or that's the only thing I can really think of in a small town environment.
Smaller businesses,
do you have any
and mom and pops and
what
entrepreneurs
do you provide to?
Yeah. So these smaller businesses do really well with PR. Journalists don't like covering the Googles and Teslas of the world. They have to, but they're not going to go out of their way to highlight features and how cool Microsoft Office, the next suite, is. They like to put the spotlight on small businesses and startups and entrepreneurs and Kickstarter campaigns because journalists are seen as curators. And, they get, pats on the back and appreciation and retweets when they profile something cool. And stuff that's really cool is very rarely coming from the large companies. They are not innovative. Their answer to being innovative is buying a startup or someone else who's innovated. So most of the innovation in all marketplaces are taking place by startups and small businesses and really small players. And so they do really well with PR. And a lot of people feel like PR is only for the venue of those who are extremely well funded and can afford PR firms, but that's not necessarily true at all. You can do releases through a service like eReleases, do strategic types of releases, and get meaningful pickup. Strategic type of releases is, something that is maybe data intensive, like doing a survey or study within your industry. And I coach a lot of clients who are about to give up on PR to do a survey within their industry. I break it down. It's very formulaic. 16 questions, 4 questions on each page of a survey through SurveyMonkey, and you then have a link at the end of it, and you send that to an audience of your industry, which is you don't have to have that ready made. There are so many trade associations, independent and small ones, in every industry. You're looking for those that have 700 members or more. Stay away from the large trade associations. They don't like these situations. They control everything. They don't need you. They're not going to work with you. But the smaller ones get no media attention. And if you approach them and say, hey, could you send this link to your members? In exchange, I'll mention you in a press release I'll be issuing over the wire. Most trade associations, the smaller and independent ones, will try to find a way to cooperate and work with you. Sometimes they may want to co-brand a survey, get a little more exposure and attention for them. I don't see a downside to that. After it's been sent out, you want to have at least like 100 results for it to have a little bit of statistical relevance. Seems like most journalists are satisfied with that. You're going to look at the numbers, the results, and try to figure out what were the surprises of the survey. You do want to make sure that you're asking really relevant questions, things that are very topical and timely today. What's going on in your industry? What are the questions you would ask people at a conference or a trade show? Like, hey, have you noticed this has been going on? Those are really great questions to put in a survey like that. You might be asking about, their spending over the next couple of quarters. Is it going to be more or less? What does hiring look like? Are they, considering layoffs? Are they having trouble hiring? Are they having trouble establishing a culture where people want to work from home? All of these sort of things that we're navigating post-pandemic make really interesting questions that people want to know the answer to in particular industries. Focus on a couple of the questions in a survey. You don't want to go through all 16 of them. I do like building out a page on your website that does have all the responses and make that available to the media. So if they want to dig in and see if there's other questions that they think might add to a compelling article, and put a quote in there as to why you felt the numbers on a particular topic skewed a particular way, because you're the expert. You're the one who did the survey, and then you send that out. And that's a really great way to get pickup. On average, between 8 and 14 articles will be written about you. Not replication of the press release, but journalists writing an article and drafting it. It's usually trade publications, magazines, as well as newspapers and other places that write about your industry and topics. The least I've ever seen anybody get from doing that I've coached through is 4 articles. So it is a great way to get that earned media that people want, and it's a great way to stand out. Other things that you could do that are newsworthy and strategic are take a topic that's really hot in your industry and do not talk about it, because everybody's talking about it. So don't do that. Be the jerk. Go in there as a contrarian, saying everybody else in the industry thinks the electric cars are great and they're just stupid. And the reason is, they catch on fire and it takes 10,000 gallons plus to put them out. Or, we think we're helping the environment and we're creating landfills filled with these batteries we don't know what to do with. And, there's ways in which to be reasonable and come in and be a contrarian and just shoot everybody else down. So are there things in your industry that everybody is just adopting like crazy and you're just like, there's a downside to this? As long as you don't alienate your customer base, because you always want to protect that, you can come in being a contrarian. So many press releases that we get are new hires, no one cares about. Like you said, maybe a local newspaper might pick it up, maybe one trade publication with a little on the move section. really see the ability of doing a press release as an opportunity for leverage. We did one press release. It's a case study on our website at eReleases during the pandemic called the Dining Bond Initiative. And it was basically where you could help your favorite local restaurant that was closed during the pandemic. It was, while we were sitting home for 2 weeks, flattening the curve, this release went out. We stopped counting at 150 articles, and it generated over $10 million in revenue that went directly back to restaurants that were closed during the pandemic. And, we did the release for free, but it would have been $350 with a new customer special. And I challenge any marketer to say, hey, spend $350 and pull $10 million of revenue out on the other side. It's near impossible, but it is an extreme example of what is possible with the leverage opportunity of going over a wire. If you have a meaningful, newsworthy type of press release. And, a lot of people feel like, I'm just not newsworthy, but you can attack it in many different ways. The survey is one, being a contrarian is another. And I have several other examples that I coach my clients through to consider so that they're doing more meaningful types of releases.
Yeah. No, I think that's all great advice. And actually, that was kind of my next question is, what kinds of things are press releasable, right? And so I think that was really good insights. The idea of a survey is really clever because, I think a lot of times, people do use press releases kind of as you described, for, hey, we're hiring or, some little business thing that's changed in their company or something like that. But I can see, in hearing you describe it, how non-compelling that kind of stuff is. And where if you can take a stance, really you are the expert in your field, whether you consider yourself that or not. And a lot of people, have some imposter syndrome or something and don't think about themselves that way, but really you are. And so there's a significant opportunity, whether it's a survey or it's any other sort of industry knowledge that you can share or become the voice of. I can see how that could be really powerful. I wanted to then sort of ask you, about how press releases have changed first, since you've been around, across this spectrum of the technology boom and how that sort of happened. And then also, is the market crowded? Are they as effective as they used to be? Can you give us a little bit of insight on that?
Sure. So press releases have remained pretty constant in what they're doing, but the media has changed. So I was there when the Newswire was really fumbling around and uncertain whether to give Newswire access to bloggers. And, I pointed out to them that, hey, this blog has more traffic than the leading trade publications website. I think that you should consider these people journalists. And they did. Today, they've, adopted social media influencers as journalists, giving them access to go and create customized feeds and, use press releases. I follow a TikToker called Snackolator, and every week he's doing several roundups of fast food and grocery stores, snacks and offerings. And he says these photos came from the press releases from these places. He's using press releases to get the messaging out, because that's the early access of when things are being announced and when they're going to hit store shelves and what the packaging is going to look like, and just a little bit of information about them. So people are getting media from lots of different places, but press releases still play a part in that space. The biggest change that's happened in the press release space over the years is the consolidation. We are faced now with basically a duopoly with Business Wire and PR Newswire. The plus side of it is it makes it easier for journalists, rather than have to go to 4 or 5 different newswires of press releases and search for stories. They only have to go to 2. And when you're busy and overworked, it's a lot easier for them to do that. And so, that does also mean that, generally when you're in a duopoly situation, you tend to pay a little bit more. So the prices at the newswires haven't really come down. But they are very effective if you use them correctly. I think the biggest thing that people need to recognize when they're doing a press release is, milestones are great. A new anniversary, a new location. But make sure you have the elements for the journalist to build a story. When journalists write articles, they like a story arc. And, one of the most common press releases we get is a product launch release. And it's usually, here's a product, here's a bullet list of features, and here's a link to the page where you can learn more and buy it. And it's really hard for journalists to build an article on that. Something that you could, something you can inject in there would be a case study, a use study. This is a client who beta tested the product. This was the problem they had. This was the results of using the product, ideally with some numbers, and then having a quote by them. And all of a sudden, you have more elements to build a story arc. And that really, goes a long way. So many people approach PR as, this is important to us. We want to sell a heck of a lot of it. And therefore, we're going to focus just on this and get it out there without thinking that, it's got to get through the gatekeeper, which is the journalist. He's protecting him or her. They're protecting their audience. And, what can I do that will actually make the journalist say, ooh, my audience would really love to learn more about this. So sometimes it's going back into the press release and reverse engineering it with some of the things that would delight their audience. So many press releases could be strengthened. For example, even a product launch one where you talk about numbers that are available out there that are public. You might have a solution that has to do with logistics, and that's what your product is. Maybe talk about the numbers of logistics, like new businesses trying to establish themselves in this space often fail within the first 5 years at a rate of 67%, often because they can't deliver the product fast enough for customers who are used to receiving stuff in 2 to 3 days. And all of a sudden that makes it, wow, this is a little more interesting. The stakes are a little bit more apparent. And so sometimes just getting those numbers and data that are out there publicly available and just incorporating them into your press release can really give more of those elements of building a story, more of making it more understandable what the problem is.
So the news wires and the two duopoly that you're talking about kind of reminds me of I've worked in radio, and most of the talking points that we get are pulled from something similar, specific for radio. But what I've noticed is that the content that is fed to something like a radio station is all the same. And you see it in the news as well. You see it in like all the local channels have the same verbatim speech kind of dialed in. Is this kind of what your service is doing, is just providing that service to the news organizations and the reporters to kind of make their job easier? Is that what you're kind of collecting all this for them, putting it out there, and then they have stuff to write about that's already there and just kind of they can pull from? Because that's what it was with radio.
It makes it easier. Yeah, it makes it easier for the journalist to go to one place, or in this case, two places in which to hunt down potential stories. It's no secret that email over time has become difficult for journalists. They receive, there's all these databases that are sold online now. And so, unfortunately, you have someone. I had this customer who was selling a new golf club product, and he wanted to pick all of these categories that were not appropriate, like banking and business and all, and in his mind,
of people would golf.
Yeah, he's thinking, these are the people who buy my clubs. And I'm just like, but these are the magazines and editors who write on this subject. They don't cover golf clubs. And so that's a mismatch. So a lot of these people will just buy a database and send to everybody. Who can it hurt? It's one button, you press it. So email has really become very difficult for people to get through to journalists. And, that's often the way that PR firms pitch, is through email. And, a lot of PR firms will tell you now that, it's not unusual for a client to come in and do a 1-year campaign that might be $20,000 to $40,000 and not get any media pickup. they often don't give any guarantee of any media coverage at all. It's because I think that the way that they pitch through email makes it extremely difficult to stand out. The ones that add telephone pitching might have better results, but I also know a lot of journalists aren't picking up the phone these days either. So it is difficult. That being said, a good publicist will have relationships with journalists, and they will pick up their phone calls when they see it on the caller ID. It's that PR firm. So really good PR firms are valuable, and but they usually have a sphere of influence that's extremely small. But I do think that for a lot of these reasons, the newswire has really become extremely more important for people to reach journalists, especially because they're so busy. And here you have this pool of everybody and their data. Unlike what you see with the radio, these aren't like little small digestible nuggets of content where everybody's going to see the same thing. It's literally a lot of stuff that's out there, and it really does make it difficult to stand out. And that's why I think that if you approach your press release more strategically, and the press release announcement is about something that really does stand out and has a difference from everything else that's out there, your likelihood of getting pickup is going to be substantially better. Generally I recommend that people build a campaign of 6 to 8 releases, and make sure that they're all different approaches, and how long it takes to get those out, it can vary. Small businesses and entrepreneurs may not be doing a press release a month. It might be every other month, or maybe quarterly. So it may take you a year and a half or 2 years to quarterly do 8 releases. But you really can't judge PR with one press release, because some will fail and some will succeed. But if you're doing strategic ones, more likely you'll get more of those positive results with that earned media than the negative results of no pickup.
Yeah, you mentioned in there, the value of a publicist or a good PR firm. I wanted to talk to you, especially for small business, the idea or the prospect of hiring a PR firm isn't very realistic. And, and even, if you have a publicist, it's probably also your receptionist. And so I wonder if you wouldn't talk a little bit about just, do we even need a publicist? Do we even need any of that stuff? Or can we DIY this? I think, with a platform like yours, I believe we can come to you with a press release, but do you offer services to help people out? Where do we learn to write these kinds of things? All that stuff, if we're going to try and do it on the cheap or on our own.
Sure. So we have all of that at eReleases. We have my beginner's guide to writing press releases. It's available for free on the website. I actually have a free video masterclass that's at eReleases.com/plan, PLAN. And it's really great for anybody who's new to PR or just considering it. And it's an hour-long video that goes through the strategic types of press releases you should be considering. And if you do that, and look at that through the lens of your business, hopefully you'll have 6 to 8 ideas that would be strategic that you could consider doing press releases. So you're avoiding those releases that don't work and don't get media pickup. So many people come to us with releases already written. And why did you choose this? Well, it's an important milestone, or the boss said, maybe we should do a release. And it was the first thing we thought of. As a result, most of those don't get media pickup. You really should, go back and approach it more strategically. And that video masterclass is a great place to do it. And hopefully, building that campaign, you'll see what works and if you can replicate it. The idea for the survey didn't come from me. It came from me noticing that one of my clients stopped doing all other press releases, and they were just doing little surveys for little micro industries, little niche industries that they cover. And they're doing 30 of these a year. And they've been doing it for like 3 or 4 years now. And I just like, wow, this still works. And I looked at their numbers, and they're still getting like 8 to 14 articles for every survey. And they're known as the survey people now. And I just said, I wonder if this would work for other clients. And I tested it and it did. And so, it is one of these things that sometimes when you find something that works, you can just keep replicating and doing it. For them, they've turned it into an annual event for all of these little niche verticals. And people want to know the answers and responses to the questionnaires. And they're considered valuable experts. They're getting tons of links each year, tons of traffic. People finding out about them. And, that's the real goal of earned media. Why are we doing this? Why does earned media matter? And the thing is that when you get an article in the New York Times or in an industry trade publication or magazine of potential customers, people will buy. And, I have one customer came to me recently and said, we got like 400 visitors from this article, and it looks like over 200 of them bought. Is that possible to have a 50% plus conversion rate? And the first thing I point out is a lot more people saw the article than clicked through. And so not everybody that visits an article is going to buy, but the people that do, when they do click through, they're invested. When I read a cool blog post or article about a Kickstarter campaign and I click through, I've already decided I want to support these guys. I want to give them my money if it's reasonable. And so a lot of people come through with that same feeling with earned media. When you do read an ad, that doesn't happen. And I think the reason that it does with earned media is because when a journalist writes about you, it is like third-party corroboration or social proof. It's a huge credibility boost and acts almost like a referral to you. And you can then take that link to that same article and share it with your social media, share it with your customers, and share it with your leads. There are a number of people in your lead pipeline that you're not going to convert. In many cases, it could be like 80% of your leads never convert. But maybe you get them to read this article and they get that same warm feeling. Maybe, another 10, 15% of them do convert. That is one of the powerful things that happens with earned media. I had a client who's a carpet company in New Jersey who had really big success getting articles in trade publications. And I point out, none of your customers are reading carpet magazines, but they said, we've got an idea. So they put together at the end of working with them for a year, what they call a brag book. And it has over 30 clippings of them, mostly in trade publications like Floor Cover Weekly and all of these places, but also their local newspaper and New Jersey Magazine. And they took that book, and every time they go into someone's home and give them a quote, they say, we may not come in the cheapest, but we know what we're doing. We've been doing it for so long, and we're recognized nationally. And they just sort of go through the book for like a minute, just showing them headlines and the places they've been picked up at. And they started converting 17% more customers from that quote experience just by adding that brag book. So that just shows you that even for a minute of exposure to earned media, people believe that you're the safer person to spend their money with.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I mean, I don't know if they're the same everywhere, but out here we have Five Guys burger restaurants, and one of the things they do at Five Guys is they plaster the place with news articles, about, they want a burger fry off, or they want a French fry challenge, or whatever they do, right? I mean, there's all these different things. But sure. But to your point about just the value of social proof, like even a company that's well established and, doing well like those guys, and there are others I can think of even right off that do something similar. This earned media bit is clearly very valuable, or they see it as a way to sort of let people know that the decision they made to choose their burger today was a good one based on Guy Fieri's advice or whoever. And so I think that's really cool. I wanted to also dig into a little bit, like we were talking about, do we need a publicist or don't we? If we've sort of decided to go on our own, and for a lot of small businesses, even $400 or $500 is a business decision for them. If they decide they want to, go it alone, or maybe there's a way to do something sort of cheap and free. I wonder if you had any thoughts about just like staying relevant in local media, even if you don't necessarily have the money to really go onto a full PR campaign initially, and then, maybe chase that up more strategically once you're generating some, I don't know, rapport with the different media agencies.
Sure. So local media is some of the easiest media for people to get. And you don't need to pay a service like eReleases or pay to go on a wire to get local media attention. The same way that a good PR firm establishes connections and builds a rapport over time with journalists, you're going to do that with your local media. And again, it might seem daunting, but if you think about it and break it down, even if you're in a big giant metro, there's probably less than 12 people who would ever write about you. And your job is just to find out who they are in your local newspaper, find out who covers your industry, get that name, call or look online and ask for their email address. They will give it to you. These aren't celebrities. These are members of the media, and they are supposed to be part of the community, and they're supposed to be accessible. And so you can say, hey, I have a story idea I'd like to send this person. They'll give you the email address. They may have you phone, ring through to that person, and you just introduce yourself and ask for their email address and say, I'd like to send a story idea along to you. And after you've done that, if you're lucky enough to have a business magazine or business newspaper in your area, find out there who covers your industry and do the same thing. Maybe there's weekly papers or magazines. Like in the Baltimore, we have a Baltimore magazine. I mentioned the Jersey magazine for my client in New Jersey. Are there opportunities like that? You may look at TV and radio as well. Are there sometimes programs that do segments where they put the spotlight on a local business that's not an advertising opportunity, or sponsored? You're looking for somebody who really is talking about business and profiles businesses from time to time. You just call and ask who the producer or booker of that segment is and get their email address. And at the end of this, you're going to have no more than a dozen email addresses. And your idea is just to reach out to them naturally as you have story ideas. I recommend at least quarterly. And you're just going to introduce yourself and say, hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm local to the area. And I've seen a lot of trends in my industry where people are talking about going green. And, as a local dry cleaner, we've invested X amount of dollars. And I'd love to talk to you about what we do and how we're a little bit different. If you can, I recommend putting a great little quote in there, because journalists can build a great article around a quote. So if you have an amazing quote where you say something very powerfully or succinctly, or it has a little creative flourish, all of those things, could be elements of what a great quote is. Basically, if a journalist paraphrased that quote, there'd be a loss. And so you want to make it painful for them to paraphrase that, because if the quote survives, you will be mentioned, as the person who spoke the quote and the context of who you are in your company. And you don't need to write a press release. The story idea can just be a few sentences and a great quote. And if you feel really ambitious, you can start to do this in your industry with trade publications. It's the same thing that PR firms do. It is more labor intensive, but if you're a small business and you're a startup, sometimes you have more ingenuity and time than you have money. And, this is a great thing to do. It doesn't have to be a daunting task. You can take basically the same message that you're doing quarterly and send it to all 12 of these people. I do recommend you send individual emails to make it a little more personalized as much as you can, and then just send it out there. You probably are not going to get any pickup for the first 6 months. I mean, occasionally you will, but often you don't. But what you find is as you do it more and more, and you're more persistent, you're going to become front of mind to these people. And often they will be working on an article and wish they had a local company to put in there, and they'll think of you. And all of a sudden they'll be reaching out to you because you're the person who's been reaching out to them every few months. And usually after a year, I think people start to get like 3 to 4 of these local articles naturally, over I guess each year. beyond that. But it does take a little bit of work. But once you've invested it, you'll continue to be the person that they run to, because they know they can rely on you for a good quote. You're accessible, and you're a great local business. And that's why if you look in your local media, you will often see some of the same companies used again and again. Here in Baltimore, the Baltimore Sun, there's this one company that is just always mentioned if they're talking about charities or giving people vacation time for charitable efforts. It's this company. This company's always mentioned. And I asked them what their secret was, and they said, I just reach out with story ideas, and often they come to me with wanting to put me in a story I didn't even pitch them. So it really is just being persistent and friendly.
Hey Ryan, do you remember a girl named Jenny that used to work for the Idaho State Journal?
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's.
So
we basically did exactly what you described here, Mickie. So I had this media contact in Pocatello a number of times. Pocatello, Idaho, is where we're from originally, and we basically did exactly what you described, which is we just kind of started to rub elbows and make friends and submit stories. And they've covered a number of things that Mike and I have done together and apart. Covered clothing company things. We've ended up on local news because of coverage on in the paper. All that kind of thing. And, for us, I mean, we were young folks, no cost, so,
Right. Yeah.
I mean, so it was great earned media at, ostensibly no cost. And it all had to do with just developing a relationship with that particular reporter.
Yeah. It's funny how, in a smaller market, they're looking for stuff to talk about. And if you give them stuff to talk about, they'll normally talk about it. I've had two, maybe three full page write-ups in the last 10 years that we've been doing events and stuff. And I know Ryan's had a few as well. So I remember your softball tournament, your Restless, everything that you've done. Mm-hmm. You've always put that out there, and more than not, they'll actually put something in the paper about it.
Yeah. Well, and to Mickey's point earlier, about, everybody could cover the Googles and the Teslas and the whatever. Like, what was truly interesting in the case that you just described, Mike, with our local newspaper, the Idaho State Journal, and some of the local media channels around there, like, they're looking for the local news interest story, And in our case, the probably the biggest one that we ever had was we used to own a clothing company up there, and we did a big anniversary party. Mike was our DJ, so he was in all the press and everything. And we did, this big event that was like our 1-year anniversary party. And here we are, kind of like a no-name clothing brand, but we're from Pocatello. And, it was mine and my brother-in-law's clothing company. And so that was kind of an interest thing, that it was this, we'd married sisters, and it was this whole thing, And so it was like, it was this really, it became this real community story. And we had a lot of local shops that were carrying our brand. So they went to all the different business owners and talked to them about that, and how they just loved that this was right out of town, and these were some people in the city, and we were kind of a community instead of some outside party like a Google or a Tesla just sending over their press release. So to your point, I can really understand or can empathize with how important it is to yes, to be interesting, but also just to be of the community can be really valuable in and of itself.
Yeah, at every newspaper, you've got people who cover certain subjects. And if you write about environment concerns and things like that, they know that their audience is going to care more if you can make it relevant by tying it into a local business.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you too. So you kind of covered this a little bit at the beginning, but I guess it was something that hadn't really occurred to me. And now after you said it, I can think of instances where I've seen it both ways, but I wanted to talk about, choosing a platform, like a eRelease or, whichever vendor somebody wanted to go with, or, going a maybe a more expensive route and choosing a press or a PR company or a publicist. If I'm looking for somebody in that trade and, I've been thinking about trying to expand my press releases, or I want to try and get a little more coverage, and this is something I want to start investing in. How do we go about choosing the good ones? And I think part of what is interesting to me specifically was what you were saying earlier about sort of people that go right to the wire versus people who just sort of syndicate. And I think a lot of times, people might, especially if they're being budget conscious, choose what they believe to be a wire. And, it's really just a syndication source where they're just kind of passing a story around to be copied verbatim here and there. And that delineation that you mentioned is something that totally had escaped me. And even in buying press releases for my own clients, over the years, I can't say with certainty that we picked somebody that was truly a wire. You know what I mean? Like, I think
Sure.
we picked a company that said wire in the name, like you pointed to. But so I wonder if there's some key things that we ought to be looking for, and maybe some of it's strategic discussion, but we can talk a little bit about, how we would go about choosing the right place, making sure that somebody's good and credible, the types of things we ought to be looking for in a company, and, and that can be your company or, maybe how you've seen it in the field.
Sure. So I think that anybody you look for, you want to make sure that you're going over a real wire, a place that has a portal where journalists log in and, have a practice of pulling content from there. As I mentioned, in the U.S., it's predominantly a duopoly of PR Newswire and Business Wire. They're both large. They're both really good. PR Newswires who we work with. But I know that if you went through Business Wire, you'd have a great experience as well. There is a lesser wire that's coming up called Globe Newswire. If you're really watching numbers, I think you can probably move a release with them for like $800. That's a 600-word press release. But you're not going to reach as many journalists because, journalists are going to want to do the least amount of work. And if they can get really good stories by just going to two places, there's not much incentive for them to go over to a third. And I think that's why Globe Newswire's had such a hard time establishing itself as a new wire. They want to be a new wire, but it's hard for, to train journalists to really go to that third place and look. There might be services out there that have partnered with these wires. eReleases is alone in that, we're the only partner of PR Newswire that gets the national distribution as part of the package that we sell at a substantial discount. But Business Wire doesn't partner with anybody. So if you find someone who says that they're going to send your release on Business Wire, they're having to pay full retail, so they're probably paying, it's going to be well over $1,500 to move a national press release of like 600 words, and so those are the things to look for. Like I said, we get questions every day. I can go through EIN Newswire for under $100, and I'm like, well, they don't reach any journalists. They don't falsely advertise that they're going to reach journalists. They're a syndication play. And if you're just happy enough to provide a report to your client or to your boss that just shows the press release duplicated on a bunch of websites with logos, then, that's great. But what you'll never have is sales from that. What you're never going to have from that is SEO benefit from articles being written about you. And you're not going to have a link.
I was actually going to ask about that SEO benefit because, if you're just looking for words on the web with your name referenced in it, that does one thing, but most of your benefits from SEO comes from clickbacks, if I remember correctly, or linkbacks is how it works. Right. If you go through a company like Business Wire, it might be $1,500, but how does that? Is it the direct articles that are written about you that provide that link back or that SEO benefit, or is it just getting your logo on as many websites as you can, kind of thing?
So, in the case of Business Wire, for example, the benefit, the SEO benefit of earned media is those original articles and getting those articles written about you and ideally with links to you. But even when they don't link to you, you do get SEO benefit. Google has something called implied link value, where if you get, if they can tell contextually from an article that it's about you, they will give you credit as if there is a link from that article to you. For example, the New York Times says they never link to anybody. They do not provide outbound links in their articles. despite that, I've gotten them to do it once. It was a resource page that was built out, I think, during the pandemic, and they did link to it. So they broke their own rule. But most of the New York Times articles will never link to you. And yet they're one of the biggest drivers of positive SEO for my clients. When my clients get picked up from New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Washington Post, specifically those three, they often see huge SEO benefit that lasts for many, many months. And again, no links from any of those places, but that implied link that Google gives you, conveys a lot of SEO benefit. The syndicated stuff doesn't provide any meaningful SEO. It's duplicate content, and it all has no follow tags within it. And that's at the direction and behest of Google, saying in press releases, we want you to tag them as no follow links. And people who publish press releases, we want you to tag them as no follow links. Now, these are the press releases, not the articles. When someone writes an article about you and a trade publication links to you, it's often it depends on whether they do follow tags or no follow tags for the linking within them. And if they do follow tags, they will certainly continue to do a follow tag for you. That being said, when you have these places that are respected as like industry trade publications are, as large newspapers are, even smaller newspapers, all of these places linking to you, they do convey a huge SEO benefit to you. It's something that you can't easily, replicate in any other way. You can guest blog on, these mega tier websites, and I've seen people play those games, and maybe they get a little bit of SEO benefit. But when I have a client who gets like 8 articles and in a short period of time, they see meaningful SEO benefit that lasts ongoing. And as they continue their media campaign and continue to get more links and more articles, they continue to see a rise in SEO.
Yeah, I love that. So one last thing I want to get into, Mickie, real quick before we wrap this up. I tend to get a lot of these, and I don't know if I'm unique, but I get a lot of these requests from people coming in through email or through LinkedIn that's like, hey, man, we really like what you do. We want to talk about you. I can make you a contributor to Forbes. I can get your thing into these different magazines. I can do X for whatever big name. And, even as you look at these, other press release companies or these sort of pseudo wires that we've all probably tried out mistakenly,
Sure.
apparently, they often have kind of a little logo quilt, that features New York Times and Washington Post and, all the big names, LA Times. And so I think that there might be a little bit of confusion around this stuff, but I guess what I want to ask about, and maybe there's nothing to this, but I mean, is there sort of like a fraudulent approach that people are going around and trying to sell us something that's really just a total bill of goods?
Yeah, the paid Forbes articles, for example, there are blog contributors to Forbes and these other places that have relationships where they will write a post and mention you or make you the center of it. You don't appear in Forbes magazine. You're not going to be in print. You're also not going to be on Forbes website on the trafficked section that all of their meaningful articles are. Again, it's a place that's relegated for their blog writers and other people. But it does allow you to use the Forbes logo. We don't do any paid placement at eReleases. We're cheap. We want to get it free, and we want to get it with integrity and authenticity. And for me, a Forbes article online only has no value because it's something that can just be bought.
Well, it's so interesting to me, because I see these a lot, and it's actually for me done damage to the Forbes brand specifically. I don't know them. I'm not trying to say anything ill about their company, but as far as I perceive the Forbes brand now, probably because of a preponderance of these kind of people saying, hey, I'll get you in Forbes, it's kind of cheapened it to some extent. And then when I'm flipping around LinkedIn or whatever, and everybody is a Forbes contributor, it's like, well, God, man, hey, I know a lot of guys that are contributing to Forbes. What's going on? Like, look at all these amazing writers in my midst. And so I think it's actually maybe doing more harm than good, or at least in my opinion.
I think that it has huge potential for that. That being said, I do know Forbes does have a lot of quality control. You just can't put anything up. And they really do have a lot of rules and how things have to be worded. And sometimes they've requested that articles be rewritten or things like that. They also make people pay a large fee to be part of that, a contributor. So they get free content, and they also get people paying to be a contributor. So I recognize that print is in a terrible situation, and this is Forbes' solution. I don't think it's the right one, but it probably is bringing a huge influx of cash that's needed in a way that isn't really hurting, their traditional print business. But I do think that it is hurting their online reputation. And I think that as a result, it devalues content, I think, under the Forbes.com website. And I think that it is a solution. I'm not sure it's the solution, but I know that people are drawn to it. I've never done it, and it doesn't really appeal to me.
Yeah.
No, well,
I think that's right.
We're pretty much at that time, Mickie. Do you want to tell people where they can reach out, how they can get in touch with you if they want to learn more about your services?
Sure. So my website's eReleases.com. All my social media is on the lower right. It's my actual LinkedIn. So I do know that social media pretty well. I have other people who handle the other social media for me. Feel free to chat, email, or call our office Monday through Friday. You'll only speak to editors. There's no commissions. We don't have any incentives to tell you something to try and get you to spend your dollars with us. We're pretty straightforward as to whether we feel we can help you. And again, I have that free masterclass that I recommend for anybody who's considering PR, and it's at eReleases.com/plan, PLAN, and it's a commitment of less than an hour.
Perfect. Well, yeah, thanks so much, Mickie. This has been really insightful. And like I say, I'm a guy that's worked in marketing a big chunk of my career. And we don't focus on press releases, obviously, but we have been asked to do them over the years. And so this has been really insightful, and I learned a ton. So thank you so much for doing this.
Well, you're very welcome.
Absolutely. And thanks so much to everybody who tunes into the show this week and every week. We'll see you next time.